This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. A full few days after the madness that was the NBA trade deadline. Now we transition to the good part. No, I'm not talking about NBA All-Star Weekend. I'm talking about buyout season, man. This is that time. Before, it was just this little truncated window, and it just kind of flies right past us. No. The NBA did us proper now. Now that we get to rest our head for a second, we then have to turn right back around and look at what players might actually get bought out and find themselves wearing some jerseys that could impact some possible playoff teams moving forward. So this is some good stuff, man. We got a great show lined up, got a lot of stuff to get into. Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand, NBA aficionado, brother from another mother, Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Yo, man, word is you might be making an excursion out to Lala, man. What's up with that?
Yeah, my dude. Getting an opportunity potentially to cover some stuff, for us out there in LA at All-Star Weekend. Not necessarily dunk contest and the All-Star game itself, but a lot of great things that take place surrounding All-Star Weekend, the culture of the NBA, which is something that we're all about. So good opportunity, I think, for me and obviously us as a show as well, too. We're bringing some of that content back to our listeners, especially in that week when there's no basketball anyway. So we'll just kind of go over some of the interviews and some of the things that I saw out there, man. But as always, you alluded to, we're going to have an amazing show. So salute to all the fans, listeners of the NBA Baseline. I can't wait to jump right into our great topic this season, buyout season, yo. Let's get it on.
Yeah, man, got some good stuff lined up for that, Shaw. Before we get into the juxt of our show, I was curious to get your thoughts about how everything transpired. We did our show with reference to the NBA trade deadline. We gave our analysis, and we gave perspective of how we thought these trades, what they meant. But I was kind of curious about what you felt and what you saw with reference to the teams that were affected by the trade deadline and their performances the day after those trades. For example, with reference to the Cleveland Cavaliers, we saw, LeBron become the Don once again with a great performance. We'll talk about that performance in the end when we do our coast to coast. And then we also talk about guys like Blake Griffin and the Detroit Pistons. I was just curious about, what you felt like and what you may have saw without the landscape of teams that were affected by these magnified trades that took place the other day.
Well, I mean, it's hard for me, as we record the show, some of them they don't have all their parts yet. But you do see, I think, maybe in the case of Cleveland, there was some rejuvenation already. They got a cupcake opponent, if you will, in the Atlanta Hawks. But they took care of business, and they don't have all their players in uniform yet. You look at kind of sideways to that. Cleveland training Wade back to Miami going and beating the Bucks at home, a Bucks team that has been pretty hot. I think winning 7 of 8 games previous to that. They take care of them at home, and Wade didn't actually do much. But again, it was just his presence alone, which I think we alluded to even in the last show, that what he can do from a locker room standpoint and just the face of the franchise type of stuff, that really gave them a boost as well too. So I think 2 quick takes, if you will, some guys who went back into new situations, if you will, and teams that are trying to still make their way before the new players get into place.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to emphasize with reference to this whole scenario is it's interesting. We don't give LeBron James enough credit. A lot has been made about the drama regarding LeBron James. Like, he brings drama, he exudes drama, he's the social media king. He plays, what I'm saying? He plays the strings really well. And usually when situations like what's happened, when an organization, and let's not act like this has not happened to LeBron James before. The Cleveland Cavaliers as an organization have, done things sideways with LeBron James when he had his first stint in Cleveland. But this situation is still unique within itself. And I have to give LeBron James credit. He goes out there, he goes ham on, yes, a cupcake basketball team, but they go and they get the job done. When there's a lot of speculation about whether or not this Cleveland Cavaliers team, regardless of the new players that are coming in, he goes out and he gets the job done. And then I look at a team like the Detroit Pistons, who have been rolling ever since they got Blake Griffin. And here there is an opportunity for the Detroit Pistons to take care of business at home against the Los Angeles Clippers, and they lose to the Clippers. Now, I'm not saying that Blake Griffin is, a, a bad basketball player. He's a great basketball player. But I think this is exactly why we make the criticisms that we make of certain players when they are not mentally putting their mind and their game where it needs to be. LeBron James knows how to separate himself from the business and from the game. And he goes out and he plays the game. And with Blake Griffin, if people have watched that game, you can clearly tell that he was in his feelings about what happened with him in the Los Angeles Clippers. And this is just not the kind of time, if you're the Detroit Pistons, to have players in their feelings about the business of the NBA. And they squander an opportunity for them to continue to move and push forward to put themselves in the best possible position for this playoff run. And so I'm just making sure that people understand these are the things that you should look for when we talk about the craziness that evolves regarding the trade deadlines. Because when impact players like a Blake Griffin goes to other basketball teams, you watch for these type of situations and scenarios that plays themselves. You could say the same thing about Kyrie Irving when he left to go play with the Boston Celtics and the games that in the matchups against the Cleveland Cavaliers. How much of it is him trying to show up LeBron James and not helping his team win? And how much of it is Kyrie Irving playing like the MVP, like Kyrie Irving, that the Celtics need to beat arguably the best team in the Eastern Conference? So as we start moving forward, look out for those interesting little tidbits because they may speak volumes about the direction and how these teams are going to position themselves as they get closer to the end of the regular season. Great show on tap. I had to get that out, get on my soapbox a little bit, put that on blast a little bit. But we got a great show going down. Buyout season, that's going to be the main topic in our section of the breakdown. And then we also have on our segment of the drop, we're going to talk about the Sacramento Kings. I know y'all love that. We love talking about the little guy. But even the little guy has got to get a little scrutiny. So we're going to get into the juxt about what is going on with the Sacramento Kings, examine their season, and what these guys are doing to hopefully move themselves in a positive direction moving forward. Once again, get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. We do it each and every single week on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, all those. Make sure you download the platform. Let a friend know. Download the platform. Allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it down. I break it down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Cauley, Warren Shaw's Baseline NBA podcast. And our main topic for the breakdown, buyout season. Hey, Shaw, man, you know us, man. We're avid fans of the dancehall movement. Like our man Busy Signal said, they can't buy we out. This is the NBA, man. Of course you're going to get bought out. I mean, listen, if you're a basketball player and you're making money and you're on a team that you don't want to be on, I'm sure you are waiting to hear your agent call you up and say, "Can't buy me out." Hey, man, they want to buy you out. You know what I mean? It's that time, because it just means that you are basically a mid-season or 3/4 of the season free agent. once you sign your name to that, hey, just give me my money and let me roll. And there's some interesting players right now, Shaw, that we need to look at possibly being situated in on other teams, possible playoff teams that can help them either add depth to the roster or be key X factor type players. Two especially that we don't even talk about because, they're not superstar names, but in the right situation, guys like a Marco Bellinelli and Brandon Wright, all with different styles to their games, could certainly help out basketball teams that obviously have eyes on the playoffs.
You're right. And Marco Bellinelli, being the first official buyout after the deadline, if you will, is going to receive multiple interests from several teams out there. Still a guy who can very much space the floor, can even knock down some big shots as well too. Not afraid of the big shot. And I think, again, that shooting is at a premium. The NBA, people want that on their roster. So I'd look for all kinds of teams to be throwing their names in the hat, if you will. They're trying to get in Bellinelli's ear from anywhere from the Portland Trailblazers to the Boston Celtics, to the Washington Wizards, people like that. All those teams have a need for another wing scorer, if you will. Especially, I think Portland probably really could use him probably the most, but they are lower down on the totem pole in terms of total playoff contenders, if you will, or elite contenders. So if he really wants an opportunity to compete at the highest level, Boston might be his best opportunity. But the thing about this that you always have to wonder with rosters and these teams is that it all depends when it happens. So the rule is you have to be bought out by March 1st in order to be able to join a playoff roster, correct? Fine. Now, as the team's trying to assess what you need, you continue to wait until, a different player becomes available or tie up a roster spot, or you just go and get what you think you need and what you want. If there's a particular guy and he becomes available, then fine. But if you're kind of weighing your options between, I don't know, Shabazz Muhammad and Marco Bellinelli, Shabazz isn't bought out yet. So you're like, all right, well, do I want to wait to see what happens here? And I think that's where it becomes an interesting factor for most teams.
Bellinelli is shooting us like roughly around 37% from three. And to your point, Shaw, he's a good space out guy. What I find interesting, and the guy scores around 11 points in 23 minutes of work. That to me shows at least some level of efficiency that when he gets his time on the floor, that he's going to go out there and he's going to help you score points. And if that's all that you're asking of him, if you're a team like the Boston Celtics, who, listen, they're a good basketball team. They score, right? But they don't score enough effectively. You need effective scores when your key guys like Tatum and like Kyrie Irving are not on the basketball court. And to me, these are good looks. So it'll be interesting to see how they evaluate guys. Because, yes, Bellinelli is a little older, a little long in the tooth. But the effectiveness of players coming in. And also the other thing as well, too, Bellinelli's been on teams where his shooting has been infectious. I think that's exactly what the Cleveland Cavaliers wanted when they got Kyle Korver. They're not expecting this guy to come in and drop 30 points simply because they need someone to relieve LeBron James. But they clearly want someone who shoots the basketball at such a way that it becomes infectious to other guys who are in shooting slumps, like the J.R. Smiths and the Iman Shumperts. Maybe this guy gets going, it gets everyone else going. And I think that's something that you have to look for as far as how you're situating your roster. And a guy like Brendan Wright, which I'm sure you're going to talk about in a moment, teams like the Golden State Warriors, teams like the Denver Nuggets, I don't think are far from having a little more meat on their bones when it comes to their front court play, their ability to play defense with length. This is what teams like the Warriors are known to do. If you're a basketball team that wants to combat the style of play that the Warriors play, a guy like Brendan Wright might be on your radar as well too.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And Wright is going to receive interest again from a couple of different teams, but he's just
as long as he stays healthy. Yeah. I mean, my goodness.
And that's the thing. He's never healthy, so that puts him in a very precarious, I think, situation. Teams can't be looking to get a lot of production out of him. I think what ends up happening, and it's a very interesting caveat that if you're following NBA Twitter, that things that I often do. It's people always saying that, listen, each year bigs become available in buyout season, and everyone's like, oh, I need the obligatory big to add to my roster. And then that big doesn't really help anybody one way whatsoever. It's just like a lot of hype and emphasis over something that doesn't happen, especially when it comes to the big position. I think the wings and the guards maybe have been just historically a little bit more impactful, but bigs particularly have not done all that great when it comes to buyout season. That said, Wright is already receiving some interest, I think, from the Houston Rockets, who have some interest in Joe Johnson as well, too. I guess they're not really enamored with what Nene's been able to do as the backup behind Capella. And again, if Wright is healthy, yeah, he does fit that mold. The same thing, in I guess in the way that JaVale McGee is helping Golden State. So would they cut loose McGee to bring in Wright? You don't know. But he will receive some interest. I just don't think it's going to be as high as some of the wing guys that are going to be available coming up in a couple weeks.
You're speaking of the big show. What other big should we also kind of keep an eye out for? There has been conversation, but there hasn't been assertions of whether or not there's possible that there will be a possible buyouts. And I will say this: if it happens to Tyson Chandler, I'm gonna pull out my rock voice and be like, finally. The Phoenix Suns have bought out Tyson Chandler, because I just feel like it's long overdue, right?
Yep.
So,
well, I think in the case of Tyson Chandler, two things have happened. That roster and that organization has been, interesting to say the very least. But then he came out last year and said that he didn't want to leave the organization. He liked kind of
He
grooming
didn't
the
want to
young
leave
guys.
the money. He didn't say he wanted to leave the organization.
Potato, potato,
Okay.
depending on how you're
Okay.
trying to read the tea leaves. But he said he was happy, and you just got to try to take him at his word when it comes to that. Now the situation is still a little bit different, and he could potentially finally get released from that situation and could go to a team that can use his services.
He reminds you. You know how this Tyson Chandler situation reminds you of. It reminds me of, you're in a relationship with someone, and you know that you got to let it go, but you don't want to be the one to do it, so you're waiting for them to do it, and then they don't want to do it, so you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting, and then finally it basically has to happen by happenstance, not circumstance, but happenstance. Oh yeah, maybe we just just probably just it just didn't work out, but like this is the kind of back and forth drama that takes place when a guy like Tyson Chandler is getting the kind of money that he's getting, and everybody knows that he should not be on that basketball team. Like, there is no place for this dude in what they're trying to do, if you even know what they're trying to do and what he wants to do. Like, it just needed to happen. So,
Right, and I think more importantly, even still, is that he becomes, if you're in the market for a big, then he becomes kind of like maybe the biggest fish that could become available. So if you're Houston, would you rather have Brandon Wright on your roster, or would you rather have Tyson Chandler? And I would take Chandler 100 times out of 100. So like, I think there will be a market if it does happen, but you got to figure out and get close to that situation to understand, okay, how close are they to making that dream in our situation here a reality for him. And then other guys who could potentially get bought out. You look at a guy like Robin Lopez, look at a guy like Zach Randolph in Sacramento as well too, even Kosta Koufos in Sacramento. The Joakim Noah situation in New York is disgusting right now. They just don't know how they want to move forward. They know that they don't want to be together, but they don't know how they actually want to, how they want to part ways. So again, there are some names out there, and some teams that are already linked to maybe certain players as well too. But it has to happen first, and then they'll be able to make some hardline decisions.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Cauley, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our topic of conversation to break down buyout season. It's that time right now where teams are looking at, some possible players that are going to be bought out of their contracts and will be available in the open market to the highest bidder, essentially. There's one I want to go ahead and let's shed the spotlight, because we talked about this person back when we did our show of the NBA trade deadline. He was included in that trade, and that's Joe Johnson. And Shaw, it's kind of funny. I've had a love-hate relationship with Joe Johnson, but my hate for Joe Johnson is a respectable hate. Joe Johnson is the type of player where, man, he makes everything just look smooth. He makes everything look so emotionally effortless with the way that he plays his game. And I've often felt like, for the money that he commanded at the height of that time when he was with the Atlanta Hawks, I felt like they needed more from him. Now, that's not to say that that's on Joe Johnson. I've always been a staunch believer that sometimes you got to stop buying into the idea that you're throwing out money to players that are just going to be who they are. The Tracy McGrady's of the world, the Derek Colemans. Let them be who they are. Don't let the money dictate what you're asking these players to do for you in the way that you're building your roster and your team. Carmelo Anthony's and such. Joe Johnson is at this particular stage in his career, man, where I really do believe the best way that he gets opportunity and shine is when he knows that he's in the best situation. And this probably is going to be one of those final opportunities for him. It's interesting because a lot of teams are looking at a guy like Joe Johnson to come in and produce in ways I think they expect Joe Johnson to produce. How big a market are we looking at with Joe Johnson? Because listen, man, he was influential for the Utah Jazz in their push last season in the playoffs. He was influential in their first round upset over the Los Angeles Clippers. I find it very hard to imagine that he is not going to get a lot of conversation and talk if and when he does get bought out and is available to the market.
Yeah, Joe Johnson is kind of in an elite category right now when it comes to his options, and he'll have plenty of them. So I think for him at this stage, he's going to be looking at the absolute best options for him to potentially win and contribute. That probably would be the Houston Rockets, and there's appears to be mutual interest there. I think he could have a very nice role for them, as a playmaking 3 and 4 at this stage of his career as well now too.
Can I interject on something real quick, Shaw, before you finish your point? Do you really, let me ask you a question. Do you seriously buy into the idea that Joe Johnson would be a great fit for the Houston Rockets?
Yeah, yeah. Why not? I mean, a guy again, nice size, can pass the ball, move the ball within that offense, along those other two great playmakers that they have, can still knock down the three at a respectable rate, and is a great locker room presence as well too. So I think, yeah, he does. He could have a very strong role for them coming off the bench and spelling Ryan Anderson in certain spots as well too at that 4 position. Again, Joe Johnson has been playing a lot of 4 in the last couple seasons just because of how the game has matured. So I think he does has a nice role he could carve out for himself in Houston, where he's not just a veteran guy in the locker room, where he's actually playing and contributing. But again, I think Golden State is obviously lurking. We alluded to that on the last show, and the Boston Celtics are also are lurking as well too. So what gives him the best opportunity to succeed? Obviously Golden State. What gives him the best opportunity to succeed and play? Probably Houston, with Boston being third in that line. You don't know if the other teams are going to be sniffing around, and I'm sure they will be. But if I'm him, that's it. You know what I mean? Maybe you can look at San Antonio as well too. But I haven't heard anything yet where the Spurs have been looking around for Joe Johnson.
All right, I see where you're coming from. I just wonder about how D'Antoni likes to use a guy like Joe Johnson, and whether or not a guy like Joe Johnson, because it's kind of like with me saying, oh, why not the San Antonio Spurs? I think that's a horrible place for Joe Johnson to go to. You've seen how Popovich tends to use veterans at times. I don't think he maximizes and uses them as much as I'd like to think. And then, they become a little disgruntled because maybe they thought that they were coming in and there's such a high level of respect for Popovich, they don't ever question it. But then it becomes questioned, and then guys like David Lee decide to retire. I tend to wonder about that with guys like Mike D'Antoni with veteran guys. The respect level is definitely there for a guy like Chris Paul. I just don't know if whether or not it's going to be there same for a guy like Joe Johnson, which is why, to your point, Shaw, I was thinking more like the Boston Celtics would be more so the ideal place, because a guy like Brad Stevens tends to use veteran, off the bench like type players effectively, more than it is efficiently. And so, and it could be an ideal situation again, because the Boston Celtics still, in my mind, have the best opportunity and chance if they continue to build up the depth of this roster. Obviously, minus not having Gordon Hayward, which they've proven that they can do what they can do without him. If they get the depth and they build this roster the way that it's needed to, with the change that took place with Cleveland, the Boston Celtics may have the easiest path to get to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I mean, that makes some sense. I mean, there is a sense
and
of a
there is a sore
think
need in that front court position. And once Horford comes off the bench, and the fact that these two guys did play together, I mean, as much as there was a lot of hype and issue, I think most of that was because of Josh Smith, not necessarily with Joe Johnson and Al Horford. I think that relationship in itself, and the fact that they're older and they're veterans, might lend, to be beneficial, coupled with Kyrie Irving's playoff experience and championship pedigree. That may be a win-win situation for a guy like Joe Johnson. Like, that'd be a much happier locker room for him to be in when situations are good or bad if he's playing with the Celtics.
Yeah, I think Boston does make some sense, especially if you look at their roster, and he can take the place of guys like Tice and maybe even Ojale, who are playing some minutes for Boston right now in that front court position. So Johnson does make some sense there too if you wanted to go there. But you do wonder, in the case of Houston, is there too much of a logjam with PJ Tucker and Moamute there already? Would those guys' minutes get cut if Johnson were to go there? The second part of it too, though, going back to Boston, as they've fallen out of the number 1 seed as we record the show, just a half game now behind Toronto. But do you feel like Cleveland's moves now make them elite contenders? You don't know what other players are thinking when it comes to that. So does Joe Johnson look at that situation? I would have gone to Boston, but now Cleveland looks like they're the favorite again. So maybe I won't take that route. Again, the easiest path for him is still to just go to Golden State and maybe potentially just collect the ring and not really have to do much. But like I said, if he's looking for an opportunity to play, contribute, be in the locker room, and still win, I think Houston and Golden State probably give him those best
Shaw, you do realize that at some point we're going to have to tackle the Golden State Warrior situation, right? This is going to be an unavoidable topic that we're going to have to at least confront. I know you don't want to do it. I know you're just like, why? Talk to me when it's, April, May time and things of that nature. But we're gonna have to say some things about the Golden State Warriors. Listen, I am a believer that there's a reason why you play the regular season. It's not, they can be bored, but there are things clearly that we can talk about and we can look at and we can see. Hey, if certain things don't tend to change, they can, rear its ugly head, when it matters the most. And we've seen that happen with this Golden State Warriors team. Not to say that, Cal is trying to whip out any kind of Calspiracy theories or nothing like that. I did say I was going to throw out some more this year, but I'm just saying we're going to have to do that at some particular point. Now, bringing a guy like Joe Johnson to Golden State, I mean, hey, it's a nice charitable thing to do. The Warriors are all about giving. Hey, give a ring to you here, give a ring to you there. Oh, you didn't win the championship with the Atlanta Hawks or with the Utah Jazz? No problem. We'll we'll give you a ring there. It's all good. I get all of that, but let's just make sure that we don't fall far off the apple tree here, with this whole situation. Joe Johnson going to Golden State might be good. I feel like he's like the older brother of Andre Iguodala that way. Maybe the offensive, twin of Andre Iguodala in that kind of sense. But it'll be interesting to see if Joe Johnson does go to Golden State, how Steve Kerr would use Joe Johnson, not so much what Joe Johnson would actually do for the Golden State Warriors. Earlier before Shaw, we talked about Shabazz Muhammad. And I'm just a little, it's funny. Shabazz Muhammad is kind of a mercurial player. This is a guy that came out of UCLA with a lot of upside, right? We use that word upside a lot. This guy is young. Under most circumstances, when we use the word buyouts, it's usually more veteran-like kind of guys. They have an established repertoire. And yes, it may be because another player, he got paid a ton of money on a bad contract and they just want to, be rid of the dude. Shabazz Muhammad is a tweener in my mind, right? Like, it isn't as if this guy's the worst player in the world, but he has been kind of under the radar because he's been, I don't know, maybe to some degree, hasn't he been misused by the Minnesota Timberwolves? And so at some particular point, when you look at this guy like Shabazz Muhammad, can he actually be a benefit to another basketball team? Is his game good enough where the translation is he goes from buyout to a team where he can go out there and be the kind of player I think we all thought he was capable of being, or he gets bought out and we're talking about him the same way that we're talking about like Trey Burke, where he's got to refine himself through the G League and then try to find some kind of arbitrary roster spot at the end of a season, a meaningless season, before we start talking about that he deserves to play in the NBA.
Listen, Shabazz has shown some signs over the course of his career when given minutes, he can be a pretty effective player. Maybe not super efficient, but not bad either. You know what I mean? Still shooting above 45%, and for the majority of his career. So, that's a good basketball player. The three, yeah, that's still a little shaky, but he's a scorer. He's a slasher. He's a guy who can get to the rim and just
he's a
put in
southpaw.
buckets.
He's a southpaw.
Yeah, so he gives you that kind of funky look as well too. And I think he's a player at just 25 years old who still has a lot of basketball left in him. I don't think he's going to go the way of Trey Burke. Again, obviously not similar players, but in terms of like a career trajectory, yeah, I think he can be much better than that. And he's just fallen out of favor in Minnesota, and it's hard to argue that when a guy like Jimmy Butler comes to the roster.
Falling out of favor? Dude was averaging 13.5 points per game last season. He's averaging 4. Okay? Like, I falling out of favor is like, you know what I'm saying? Drop him off a cliff. Okay?
And he didn't expect to be there. But that's what it boils down to. He didn't expect to be there because he saw the writing on the wall as well, too. Obviously, when Butler was traded for and some of the other moves that were made, he was hoping to get a lucrative deal in free agency. And for whatever reason, you think, again, for certain players just kind of fell into that mold where it just didn't work out for them this summer. They became free agents at the wrong time, and money was dried up by the time people started to kind of look at their skill set. So he's like, all right, well, whatever. I guess I'll just come back here and see what happens. So yeah, he's trying to play it out, but thought he still would be able to carve out some sort of role for them. But even with a guy like Jamal Crawford on the roster, that kind of takes him out of the fold too, coming off the bench. Even Bjelica, who's hurt this year and then finally came back. Now, Muhammad still didn't get that run. So I understand his plight and saying that he wants to be bought out and get an opportunity to try to recreate his value for these last 28 to 30 games or whatever it is. And then wherever he goes, I think he'll be very impactful. Again, you look around the landscape of the league, if they do it, the wing position. So teams that kind of we've already mentioned as well too. Portland can definitely use a small forward. You don't know if Utah in some shape or form, do they try to make a push and bring him in there, to be like their Rodney Hood replacement? I don't know, but I think he's going to have some options one way or the other. It just depends where he want to go. Maybe even New Orleans, as another scenario, in lieu of kind of what they've been doing out there as well too. So Muhammad should have some sort of a market if and when he is bought out.
What about the Golden State Warriors, Shaw? I know that this is, we talk about.
Love you some more.
Well, I feel like we've neglected them a little bit. So we gotta talk a little bit. No, but hear me out here. This is going to probably be my conspiracy theory for a moment. What if we talk about how, the Golden State Warriors have put themselves in this position where they say they feel like as an organization that they're far ahead of the curve than I think, maybe even people give them credit for. Let's not overlook the fact that, Klay Thompson may become a free agent, right? Like he may become available in the next couple of years. And there's all that talk and speculation about the Los Angeles Lakers making him play for 2 max contract players, okay? And other teams. What if you're the Golden State Warriors, whether you win or you don't win, you may have to prepare for the departure of Klay Thompson. Here you got a 6'6", 220 guy, doesn't shoot the 3 like Klay Thompson, but pretty much embodies the same makeup on the left-hand side than you have with a guy like Klay Thompson. That, if he actually is capable of playing the kind of way that you think, if given those minutes, he might actually be somewhat of a replacement. You know what I mean? For what might possibly happen. Like, in other words, if you're a team like the Golden State Warriors, you want to prepare yourself that you may have to, whether it be through draft or maybe you find it through what they've been doing over the last few seasons, these reclamation projects from buyouts, JaVale McGee's, Shabazz Muhammad's, plug them right in, and they service the Warriors, who will still be a max basketball team with Draymond, with Curry, with Durant, right? Given if Durant obviously stays, there's no reason why he shouldn't. I'm just saying, isn't it not possible that you could see them put somebody in place, a guy like this? He's only 25 years old. You know what I mean? And could possibly be, I'm not saying he's replacing Klay Thompson and what Klay Thompson has given. What I'm saying is you have to look at the possibility that if Klay Thompson leaves, what do you do to fill in that void?
I think with Golden State specifically and Bob Myers as their general manager, they've been extremely fortunate, but they've been extremely intelligent as well too. In the event that they feel like Klay is going to bounce on them, and next year being his free agent summer, if you will, they would definitely make a move. They can't in any shape of imagination on God's green earth can they let Klay Thompson get away for nothing. So if they feel in any way, shape, or form that they're not going to be able to re-sign him, they're going to make a move. Now, I understand your point in saying, well, do you bring people on the roster now to start maybe grooming behind them in any way, shape, or form? Yeah, I guess you can see that. I don't know if Muhammad's that guy, but they probably want something similar in terms of a guy who can still space and keep them and even defend the way that Klay Thompson has been doing his whole career, and that's where Muhammad falls extremely short of that calling card. Even if you think Muhammad can be like a plus scorer, giving 30 minutes a night, can he get to 18, 20 points per game? Maybe that's a possibility. But defensively, he'll never be what Klay Thompson is. And that's where they would definitely kind of scoff at the idea of trying to bring in Muhammad to be groomed behind Klay Thompson altogether. But in general, in theory, yes, they need to start thinking about, what their future is going to look like, beyond even this season. And I'm sure they are. They're very intelligent there in Golden State. So Bob Myers,
yes, they are the Elon Musk of the
So he's not a former executive of the year for nothing. They have a plan in place, and even KD not signing a completely max deal this summer so that Iguodala and West and those guys could all stay. You just wonder, okay, is that going to be a continued trend for this roster as they try to keep things together?
Well, I appreciate you, Shaw, for helping to validate my conspiracy theories. It's always wonderful when someone errs on the side of making me look much more insane than I actually try to put the train of thought out there to be. So I kudos to you, my friend. Nonetheless, this is the time of the year again where you get keeping your eyes on some key players and where they might wind up being if they are part of the buyout season. Cauley, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. And this was the breakdown. Time now for the drop. Cauley, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. Our subject on the drop. Let's talk about the Sacramento Kings. When was the last time we talked about the Sacramento Kings, Shaw? Oh yeah, was it yeah, when Vladdy, you know what I'm saying? What did you say? He gave up DeMarcus Cousins for a bag of chips and a ham sandwich? Pretty much.
Lots have changed though since that time.
Well, apparently so. Well, no, let's not be too, let's not get too harsh on them. They, listen, they drafted De'Aaron Fox, and clearly they drafted right. They got themselves a quality guard, hopefully of the future. They know what they're doing. The rest of the other things that I guess we're going to discuss about the Sacramento Kings might be left to be desired, though, right? Or not?
It's a little bit. So I mean, we want to try to take a positive spin on a kind of a murky situation that they've created for themselves.
Okay. How so, sir? How so?
Well, I think with Sacramento, what we all know and alluded to, and if you listen to our show, we've kind of harped on the fact that they overdid it when it came to adding veteran talent to this roster. They just didn't need all the guys that they got, especially with the youth movement. So we applauded them on one leg, the first part of the summer. Hey, great, get young, got some nice picks, like these guys potentially pan themselves out. And then all of a sudden, the second part of the summer, they go and sign, every veteran imaginable. And now they're in this situation where we're playing them, but we should try to develop our young guys. Maybe our young guys aren't ready yet. Okay, now they're ready. And now you still have these veterans on the roster that you have to kind of figure out what you're going to do with them. So we alluded to some of them a little bit in previous segment in terms of the buyout candidates, Vince Carter, Zach Randolph, even Kosta Koufos. Those guys could potentially be gone. So they're basically now trying to make up for a situation that they shouldn't have put themselves in to begin with. You weren't going to be a very successful team at all. They had some delusions that thinking that maybe the veterans would help push them to the top and maybe they can make an 8-seed run. That was never going to happen. But hey, I guess if you feel like if you have a shot, then you guess you got to take it. But realistically, that was never going to be the case for them. So now they're going to switch gears to these last, part of the season here, this last third, and give all the young guys some run. Finally unleash Willie Cauley-Stein 30 to 35 minutes a night. Just let him go out there, run around, do what you do. Trill. Scally BCA should be getting some of his minutes as well too. And then of course the big fish in De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield. Those guys need to be the focal point of the offense you're trying to develop, and whether or not you want to keep those guys, especially in the case of Cauley-Stein, getting into, extension time, if you will, in a year or so from now. Again, is he somebody you want to keep in line? They have the rookie Harry Giles, who they love. I know he's out for the season, but they say he's looked great in the workouts and is still recovering. And is expected to be back. By next season, it could maybe play summer league as well too. So with all those bigs, they just released Papagiannis, and after all the trades as well too. He's another somebody who he could maybe go back to Europe or he can maybe catch on somewhere else. They have too many bigs, and they just need to evaluate all of them to figure out how they want to move forward, moving into the next coming seasons.
Well, see, so it's interesting, Shaw, because you brought up Skal Labissière, and then there's reports that they're possibly looking. They were possibly looking to move him.
That's because of Giles. They're very high on Giles, again, who hasn't played a minute. But they're just trying to figure out, all right, well, do we need all these bigs? And the answer to that was always no. They just didn't need all those bigs, especially in today's NBA, when none of those guys are spacers on the floor. So, they have some evaluation that they absolutely have to do, and they just need to do it quicker than they have been going at it, previously. Even moving away from the bigs too. You look at a guy like Bogdanovich too, nice wing player. So he's kind of competing with Buddy Hield, who's your starting two guard. So for me, like I said, they have a lot of questions, but they can start to clear up those answers if they play the young guys moving forward.
So how much of this is on Joerger then? Because we look at other teams who have put themselves somewhat into this situation where they're collecting assets. We could have said the same thing about the Boston Celtics. When they were collecting all of these draft picks, and then they didn't choose to trade to get a marquee player, free agent, marquee free agent, or whatever the case may be. Remember, we were hard on the Boston Celtics for that, and they chose to keep the Jaylen Browns and the Jason Tatums. And I've said, all right, if you're going to keep guys, these guys have got to produce in some way, shape, or form. You can't sell people on the idea that these picks meant more to be kept than they did, basically to be dangling out there and then not to use them, right? And I'll give Danny Ainge a ton of credit because they have struck gold on the talent that they have drafted. We can say that the Sacramento Kings have struck gold on getting De'Aaron Fox. They drafted Skal Labissière, and I've said Skal Labissière, when given opportunity, he's got to put some meat on his bones, but the guy can go out there and he can give you something. He reminds me a little bit of like John Henson, right? And I feel like John Henson, unfortunately was just in a bad situation because the Milwaukee Bucks just do not develop the talent of the people that they draft, with the exception of Giannis. But I feel like that, to your point, y'all, remember you shot me down on giving credit to Giannis Antetokounmpo and the influence that Jason Kidd had on him, that this is more about Giannis and what he wants to do, not so much about what, what the Bucks want to do for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like, he is the reason that the Milwaukee Bucks has a sense of relevancy at this moment in time. I wonder about this same situation with the Sacramento Kings, because it isn't as if the talent that they don't have, they have not been putting them in a position for us to properly evaluate them. Now, to your point, they're on this truncated timeline because they've dumped enough more talent onto this roster. Like, look, Iman Shumpert is not 35 years old. The guy is not even 30, right? You bring him in. That's another two guard. Right? So you weren't confident in Buddy Hield, but he was the focal point of the trade last season with DeMarcus Cousins, right? You still have Skal Labissière. Now you have Harry Giles, who everyone says you're completely high on. You've got Justin Jackson. You've got Trill. You've got Bogdanovic. At some point, the talent has got to translate to some kind of identity of who the Kings want to be, or else you're just basically collecting random assets with no fixation of how they're channeling themselves together to be a basketball team where you can see a future. Like, you can at least say the same thing. You could say the same thing about the Philadelphia 76ers, but at least with the Sixers, you clearly can see what they've channeled themselves to be. It's Simmons, it's Embiid, right? And
yeah, and I think that's
right.
where the problem is, in essence, that the level of talent, there is no superstar there. You don't see that clearly. And you definitely can't see that if you're not giving guys those minutes. So for whatever reason, it still baffles me, in essence, that you traded for Hield, said he was going to be the centerpiece of a trade where you lose DeMarcus Cousins in it, and then he's sometimes coming off the bench, sometimes he's starting, sometimes he gets 16 minutes, sometimes he gets 25 minutes. Like, to me, if that's your dude, then go all in, play him, and see what he is, and let him become the next Steph Curry, as Vivek Ranavida said. Like, get out of here. That's not going to be the case, but play him to see if he can become anything.
That was absolutely the worst
shell of what that's supposed to be. And that's where you kind of fault this franchise. So for me, you're looking at it as like, okay, is it De'Aaron Fox? Is he the guy, who can be, pushing for the fringe of a last spot on our all-star roster someday? I don't know. They don't know either. So, and they haven't given themselves the opportunity to find that out. And that's where I kind of knock them. So this last part of the season, as I alluded to earlier, it has to be about just looking at the young talent, looking at these guys and figuring out, all right, where do we stand? Because I don't think Skal is it. Willie Cauley-Stein can be a very good, impactful player, but is he going to be an all-star level talent someday? I find that hard to believe. I mean, he can be good on a bad team, and I think he can even be a good rotation player on a good team, but I don't think he'd be the centerpiece of any roster at this stage of his career. So then it goes back to Fox and Buddy Hield, who we still have major questions about. Although I really love De'Aaron Fox, though, so don't get me wrong.
So what do you expect of this basketball team is to what do you want as far as their focal point for the rest of this season, Shaw? Is it about establishing the core players? Is it about finding your star player, your franchise player, or is it about getting these guys collectively as a unit to go out and learn how to win and play basketball, right? Like, is it in other words, is it a foregone conclusion that they may have their diamond in the rough with what they have already right now, or are we talking about them having to go once again in the draft and trying to find that player.
Yeah, it's not a foregone conclusion at all. I think they just need to start going down that path. They should have been doing it the entire season. That's really what my overall point is. So yeah, do it now, these last X amount of games for sure. And try to get some clue to how you should maybe draft and say, okay, do you see the makings of a superstar in one of these guys? And I don't know yet. Like I said, it has to play itself out, but they still need to get better through the draft. You know what I mean? Or potentially maybe even through some trades as well too. Maybe they can package some of these young guys to get a draft pick somewhere along the lines. You don't know what the value is of Scal potentially somewhere else, or even Cauley-Stein somewhere else. I don't think they're trying to move those players, but you might have to, just to upgrade the overall talent of this roster if you want to try to fast track this thing a little bit, because right now it just seems like, hey, we have some young players who shown some promise, but we don't know how good they can be yet, and they just haven't given themselves an opportunity to truly evaluate everything yet. So I hope for the best for them overall. Because I don't dislike Yeager as a coach. I don't like everything he did in Memphis in terms of, wanting to be there, not wanting to be there. But for players who played for him, they seem to like him. And I think that's the same sense for this Kings roster and organization right now as well.
All right, Shaw, before we, sign off on what we want and expect for the Kings, you talked about Willie Cauley-Stein. So I want to touch on Willie really, really quick. When you look at his career so far, how troubled are you about where his place is and where it should be with this Kings organization? Do you see him developing to be the kind of player that you would have expected him to be, or do you see where he's going to be compromised no matter what happens, going down the road?
Compromised? I don't know if he's going to be compromised, but I still don't know. Again, it's the same point. I don't know why they weren't playing him all the time.
So Shaw, hear me out. Willie Cauley-Stein is a 7 foot, 240-pound dude. Understandable to your point. He's not averaging consistent minutes. But 12-6, right? Like, so I guess in other words, he's to be a centerpiece big that goes in there and should be somewhere. Listen, even with the inconsistent minutes, he should be 12-8, maybe 12-9 or something, right? And you're just not seeing that. Now, the kid's only 24 years old, but I'd have to imagine, even when you had DeMarcus Cousins next to you, and to some level and degree, DeMarcus Cousins doesn't exude, I got to be a double-double guy. He's just someone that's like, I know how to score, and I know, and I can find my way underneath the rim. And he can accidentally walk into double-doubles, right? How is it that it's not translating for a guy like him? Even with the inconsistency of minutes. Again, let me make sure I press upon that. When I'm not talking about Willie Cauley-Stein being a bust. But what I am talking about is 12-6 for a 7 foot 240. That concerns me. It concerns me because even if he is in there, he should be helping them rebound the basketball better. And I don't know if or not we're even getting that from Willie Cauley-Stein.
Well, he's averaging a career best, 6.7 rebounds. So, want to take it from that standpoint.
I know the glass half full. I get it.
Yeah.
Because me, Sha, I'm saying I'm Mr. Pessimistic. Clearly, I guess that's where my concern is. I mean, he averages barely a block per game. I just you can't tell me having this kind of height and this kind of, and you come from the pedigree of Kentucky and this kind of athleticism that this kid has, and I'm not saying that he's got to be a cornerstone player. We've already talked about that. I just feel like it concerns me that this kind of body type, this kind of player, these kind of numbers, they worry me as a trend of where he starts and where he should end up. And we're talking about that in relation to the Sacramento Kings.
So let's have some fun. We love to use our per 36. If you extrapolate that out, 16.4, okay. Almost 9 rebounds a game, almost 3 assists a game, a block and a steal, and that's what it boils down to. So I think for Trill, it really is a matter of getting minutes. Now, yeah, would you want him to be more consistent and more active just because, like you said, of his body type, his physical gifts? The fact that he can be a switching big who can actually maybe stay with some swingmen on pick and roll and things of that nature. Like all of those are things that we were sold on, with him coming into the draft. I think he's gotten better. He's actually improved his jump shot. He's more confident in that shot. I've seen him take 15 to 16 footers, from the free throw line, corner extended, all of those things. Like he's doing those things. He is getting better. But the minutes have just been juggled too much, I think, to really get the consistency that has been needed. And hopefully that's not an issue that's going to continue to plague him, on the Sacramento team. They just need to buy in, go out there, throw him out there 30 plus minutes a night and see what they have in him to see if he can be, really a 17 and 10 guy, 2 blocks, a steal a game. Like, I think that is something that's realistic for him. But again, just does he do it in the most effective way that leads to winning, and in terms of helping and expanding that locker room as well too. I don't know the guy. I've never spoken to him, so I don't even know kind of like what his mindset is like per se. But looking from the outside, I don't look at Willie Cauley-Stein as, the leader of a locker room yet. And that's the type of players and people that need to kind of bring in here. And I think that's where De'Aaron Fox will probably step in for this team and this roster.
It will be. I will agree with you, Shaw. I will be very interested to see if there is a bond that can be built with Cauley-Stein and with De'Aaron Fox. If there's a way that they can make certain things happen, that might help highlight his value to the Sacramento Kings and why they took the chance in moving Boogie Cousins at the time that they did and have decided, we're going to stay, we're going to run with him. Whether, he should be the cornerstone, center for this team and everything. So it will be interesting to see if that does play itself out. What I think will be interesting as well too, Shaw, is what does happen in this offseason. Because even when you have what happened to Boogie Cousins, which happened last year, right? And you now have a full season. There was still a lot of stuff that took place with, Fox in the draft, and you bring in all of these veteran guys, which I just felt like it was too much. It was overload. I think now, if you are Cauley-Stein, you have to really start taking stock in whether or not you might buy into the idea that the Kings are buying into you. And I want to see who Cauley-Stein works with in the offseason. Work with a Shaq, work with an Hakeem Olajuwon, work with some guys that have established offensive game and helped improve his defensive, proudness that he already has. Help him work on his overall game where he comes into this next season as a player that you say, he's finding a way. He's turning that corner. That will be interesting because I do believe that if he gets right, he will incrementally help the Sacramento Kings in ways that maybe even Jaeger can't possibly help these guys, accommodate to learning how to win basketball games. Because it's just, I'm not saying he's he's the golden child. But what I'm saying is that I think that there's a motion. I think that there's something in Cauley-Stein that I think is good for the Sacramento Kings. And it's a question of whether or not he's waiting for the Kings to bring that out of him or he's going to bring that out for the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah. Well, again, it really is going to be a wait and see approach. And you do wonder about, this is something where it'd be great to have some conversation, with some of the more inner working and interconnected players or not players, but coaches of the league as well too, in terms of the player development. What is Sacramento's player development like? And, can they get some of these guys to that next level? And then, there's that dichotomy that players often have sometimes with their own handlers and trainers that they deal with outside of the coaching staff. So you just want to see what happens there with that, because this Sacramento team, they have some young talent that you look and you kind of think, all right, well, maybe potentially it could get there, but do they have the development team in place to kind of get these players to the next level?
All right, interesting stuff. Sacramento Kings, not a great season for them so far, but they do have some talent and they have some possible assets. We'll see how they play themselves out with the remainder of their schedule and see what happens with these guys moving forward as they start nearing and start eyeing themselves as far as the draft goes. And, again, this is a basketball team that has been much maligned. They've not been successful. So much turmoil. It would be nice to see them be competitive once again in the Pacific Division. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cauley, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
Damn you, Joe. Damn you. As we are recording this podcast, man, Joe Johnson basically just pissed all over our breakdown conversation He is now officially going to sign with the Houston Rockets. Buyout season is in full effect. Damn you, Joe.
Well, that goes to show, does he think, or do you think he can fit in that team? Again, I think interesting questions in terms of the logjam altogether. But he goes to a situation where he can pretty much be impactful and gives him an opportunity to win immediately and challenge the Golden State Warriors.
Listen, kudos to Joe Johnson. The man is in high demand, and kudos to the Houston Rockets. Daryl Morey did say specifically that he was definitely eyeing the buyouts portion of the season, which is probably the reason why they were not active in the trade deadline. He knew you still needed to improve that roster, and he certainly helped out their own cause by getting a guy like Joe Johnson. Out in Portland, Dame Dollar got busy, dropped 50 in 29 minutes. What we think about Dame Dollar, Shaw?
Getting hot at the right time, wants to keep his team right in the thick of it in the Western Conference. At the end of the day, when a guy scores 50, ultimately other guys can't really do much. So CJ McCollum and Yusuf Nurkic were just kind of bystanders watching the show as Dame drills 50 points, hits 8 threes or whatever it was. Again, this is a guy who's one of the elite scorers in the NBA. And although, I've had some, not to say disparaging comments about him per se, he's definitely an elite talent, and I applaud him on this effort.
Definitely, man. Listen, Dame Dollar doing this thing, man. Oh, by the way, he was just letting Russell Westbrook know, I am an all-star, buddy. So make note of that. LeBron James, another triple-double. Yeah, it was against the cupcake. But interesting thing about LeBron James, 4th player in the last 35 seasons to drop consecutive 15-assist triple-doubles. LeBron the Don.
As you just talked about Dame Dollar, that old commercial, dropping dimes, that's LeBron James, absolutely. One of the best passers in the history of the NBA. Damn his size or position, just one of the best passers, period. And to see him go out there and get triple doubles in the way that he can, with those lofty assist numbers, with that roster now, even as it was when they played the Atlanta Hawks, that really does say something about how great that guy really is.
Yeah, he's in great company. Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, and Magic Johnson, the others who've been able to accomplish that feat. I'm sure people have already seen about KP. He's gone for the rest of the season. Bad news for the New York Knicks. Even worse news is they continue to add more guards to their roster.
Yeah, that really is pretty crappy news.
Right, you lose Kristaps Porzingis, so what do? You go and you get yourself another point guard.
Yeah, you get Emmanuel Mudiay. Yeah, that'll work. So Knicks going to Knicks, as they like to say, and in the Twitter sphere. And it's unfortunate to see KP go down. It's a situation where he's probably going to miss a good part of next season as well too. And I know he's seeking a second opinion on that knee. Hope to see him back on the floor as soon as possible. But the Knicks definitely are in full tank mode. There should be no question about what they're trying to do, and hopefully they at least can be successful doing that.
All right, out in Charlotte, while KP is obviously suffering from his knee injury and is gone for the rest of the season, Kemba Walker is the replacement to be added to the NBA All-Star, and well-deserved. I mean, he was a borderline player that, obviously because his team just can't win for the life of him. But, it's good to see Kemba Walker being recognized that he's still an all-star caliber talent.
And Kemba is a dope dude, really well-deserved for him to get this opportunity. It unfortunately comes at the expense of a guy like Ben Simmons, whose team is actually competing for a playoff spot right now. So I think there's some trepidation, when it comes to that. Should Kemba be there, or should be Ben Simmons as a guy whose team is actually in the playoff hunt, as they did kind of for Goran Dragic, getting him in there, with the earlier replacement. So again, not to sour Kemba's all-star nod, but it did come at the expense of somebody who might have been just as deserving.
All right, out in Brooklyn, Jeremy Lin, he opts in for the next $12.5 million. Why? Well, no, I know why for Jeremy, but if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you're like, why?
I mean, hey, you gave him that deal, expected him to be a contributor alongside D'Angelo Russell, especially this year and moving into the coming years as well too. And Lin has, again, he has that New York flair ever since Linsanity, all that, and that was part of the ploy bringing him there. Unfortunately, good cat who just can't stay healthy himself.
He is single-handedly one of the greatest marketing tools.
Yeah, no doubt.
For self-promotion. It's just absolutely amazing.
So
he needs to seriously, be a part of the Harvard School of Business when this is all said and done, and really just kind of etch out the secrets to people of understanding how to market yourself in the NBA.
Well, yeah, his team and his agency definitely have done a great job in keeping him relevant in this space. But I think for Brooklyn, it really becomes an shucks type of moment for them because Spencer Dinwiddie has played so well and is on like a $1.5 million deal or something like that. So it's like, all right, well, now we bring Lin back. Does he become like a super six man next year, or do they even bring Dinwiddie back one way or the other? So they'll have some options potentially. I think that's why Dinwiddie's name was mentioned at the trade deadline. Nothing actually ended up happening with that, but nevertheless, Brooklyn is in decent shape, with their guards and that potential to maybe do some upgrades moving forward.
If I'm Spencer Dinwiddie, I'm hiring Jeremy Lin to be my agent moving forward.
I can see that.
Just saying. All right, finally, Shaw, probably more on a serious note, and we're talking about the Philadelphia 76ers. Markelle Fultz is expected to miss the entire season. But I think more so to the point is a lot of the speculation regarding Markelle Fultz and his future in the NBA. There have been some numerous reports that he's clearly not the same player that, prior to this injury. And this could actually be a long-lasting injury. He may never even be the kind of player that I think the Sixers had anticipated in him being the #1 draft pick in last year's draft. How serious is this situation for Fultz?
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know all the nuances and intricacies of it. There's a possibility he can miss the season. He could come back. But when they start to throw those types of things out there, you just, in the case of Philadelphia, you're just kind of used to it. Oh, another top draft pick was going to miss out the rest of the year. But there's some serious things going on with Fultz, and we may have to investigate this on our future show. Bringing somebody more connected into the Philadelphia 76ers, because there's conversations about his headspace. Whether this is just a mental block that he can't get over. I think it's called in baseball, you have the yips where you can't throw the ball, whatever. Like he just can't shoot the ball.
You mean like the Rick Ankiel effect? Yes.
Yeah. Was that Mackie Sasser for some other baseball analogies as well too? So like that to me, if that's really what it boils down to, that would be very interesting. And there was some social media stuff that he put out that has people kind of wondering, okay, well, what's going on in that situation? So this is something we'll probably end up doing a topic like a full breakdown on at some point. If we can get a Philadelphia insider to kind of help us out with it, because I'm very intrigued what's going on with Markelle Fultz.
All right. Well, we definitely keep our eye on what's happening out there. And listen, if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, you have any issues about finding guards, maybe you want to holler at your boys upstate in New York. It seems like they got guards on surplus to loan you out, to help you make this final push to the Eastern to make a run for the Eastern Conference playoffs. Awesome show altogether, Shaw, with the breaking news about Joe Johnson signing with the Houston Rockets. Any final thoughts about that, my brother?
Yeah, well, kudos to him and the Rockets for getting it done and getting it done pretty quickly. So we'll see how it all meshes. Houston, I think, has been going through some changes with Nene not really being effective for them and being hurt again, as always. So we'll see what they end up doing overall with this. And I think you're already starting to see the comments out there that the Rockets and Warriors are really going to be the true NBA finals, that nobody's really comparing to that. So it should be a great run for Houston down the stretch of the season here.
Yeah, listen, smart moves by Daryl Morey once again has reascended himself as obviously being the executive of the year. And we'll see how this continues to play. But big news once again, Joe Johnson signs with the Houston Rockets. He opts out of his deal. He gets bought out by the Sacramento Kings, and he's basically donning a red and white jersey. And hopefully that means big things for the Houston Rockets as they continue to make a push to be one of the top teams in the Western Conference. For the Baseline, Cauley, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys hanging in with us. We also appreciate y'all being a part of us as we break you news, man. We love doing that while we do our show. And we'll catch up with you guys next time.